In this video, I'll show you how to build automations that can streamline your video editing process to 10x your content output. I've helped more than 300 content teams streamline their content process using the Content Engine database. It stores all of your content in a database and allows you to easily create, produce, and distribute hundreds of text, images, and videos per week. It's a robust system and it's capable of a lot, but besides having direct links to all of the content that's created and automatically generating all the folders, a key feature of the system is creating these placeholders whenever you create a new project. Right now, we're looking at a video interview project that gets distributed to YouTube. And as you can see, as the project is created, it creates a placeholder for the YouTube video, the YouTube thumbnail, an audio version of the video, a thumbnail for the podcast, and video placeholders for the vertical videos that you'll repurpose from the long form video, and then also thumbnails for the vertical videos themselves. And so every time I create one of these new projects, these placeholders are automatically added so that your team knows exactly what to create. And once they have these assets ready, they can simply drag them into Frame, just like this. They can even upload multiple at the same time. And then once they're uploaded, it's very easy to just drag them on to the placeholders. Here's the thumbnail. We can drag that on the YouTube thumbnail. We can drag in the audio podcast. We can drag that onto its placeholder. And then these vertical images can be placed on their placeholders. And so you can see it creates an environment where your team knows exactly what to create. It makes it easy to upload and then associate all of these different assets with the required assets of that particular project. And in KEDB, we are able to define these different workflows. Here's the project I was just showing you, the video podcast. And so inside the system, I can define these packages and all of the different assets that we should be creating every single time. And then all of these folders in Google Drive or frame.io, and these placeholders are created automatically. And then if I wanted to add additional assets to this package, I could just come here, add it, and then the next time I created a new project, that placeholder would be added here automatically. So in this video, I'm going to show you automation that will create these placeholders and the automations that will allow you to stack uploaded videos on top of those placeholders, which will automatically update an Airtable row to keep track of all of the updated content. And then I'll also show you how to create automations that can automatically update the status to needs review as you upload new content, and then how to hook up automations to the status changes to notify your team when things need to be done. Now we're going to build these automations from scratch, and we'll also build out a sample Airtable database. But if you want access to the make.com blueprint that we'll build in this video, so you can simply import it and have the automations, as well as the Airtable database that we'll build in the video, make sure to jump into the No Code Architects. It's a growing community. You can get access to a make.com workshop and a bunch of templates to projects like you're seeing in the video today. Plus you can get help to all of your tech support questions. So to get started, let's first go ahead and create our Airtable database. We're going to build it from scratch. We've got a brand new database. Go ahead and close that window there. I'm going to rename the base to our content database, and then I'll rename this table here to content. Now let's go ahead and update these fields here. I'm going to rename this to content ID, and I'm going to make it an auto number field. I'm going to go ahead and delete this, and we'll start from scratch. Now let's go ahead and add a description, single line text. Create field. Then we're going to need a column that will allow us to store the individual frame.io IDs for each asset in the frame account. So I'll add a single line text frame.io ID. Then I'm going to go ahead and also include a frame.io URL, which will link directly to the asset. We'll go ahead and use the URL, create field. Then I'm going to go ahead and create a status. We'll use a single select field, create in progress, review, approved, and published. We'll go ahead and create that field. And I'm also going to add a created timestamp with the created time field type. Go ahead and create field. It'll name it for us, created. And there we go. Now, one other thing that I'm going to add is a content type. And I'm going to add that content type in a new table, and I'm going to link it to the content table. So you can add that table a couple different ways. Here, I'm going to do it just simply by adding a linked record. Since that's ultimately what I'm going to do anyway, I'll be able to create that new table here. I'm going to name it content type, and I will also name the table content types. We'll turn this off. We're not going to allow linking to multiple records. Let's go ahead and create the field. It's also going to create the table. I'm going to jump over there. So we have the name of the content type, and it's also got a column here that also helps us link it back to these pieces of content. So I'm going to come here to the content types, and I'm going to add a video content type, and I'm also going to add a image content type. Now I don't really need to see this column here, so I'm going to hide it. But I do need to add one more field here, which is an attachment field, which is going to be the placeholder image that will be used to create these different images here in Frame when we create new pieces of content. So I'll go ahead and create this field. And so for a video, I'm going to use this video placeholder, which is just a 5-second video with nothing else in it. I'll upload that here to the placeholder image. And then for the image, I will use this image placeholder, which is just a static image. And then I'm going to come back here to the content tab. And so for any given piece of content that we create, we can now associate a content type to it. We'll make this row a video. We'll make this row an image. And then we'll make this row here a video as well. And then I'm going to go ahead and add a lookup field to pull in that placeholder image into this table when I have selected something. So now we see here we have those placeholder images ready to go associated with each piece of content, so that when we actually trigger the automations, we'll have placeholder images to create these in Frame. So from a usability standpoint, we don't really need to see the frame.io ID. I'm going to go ahead and hide that. We don't really need to see the created date. I'll move that to the end. We don't really need to see the placeholder. I'll go ahead and hide that as well. It would be nice to have the frame.io URL so we can simply go to it when we need to. We have the description. I'll make that a little bit larger. So now what we need to do is to create that automation that will create the placeholder in Frame when we move the status to create. So let's say we were working on a YouTube video. And just for a demonstration, I'll go ahead and add one more field here called publish date. We'll make that a date field. I won't include the time. And let's say we wanted to publish this YouTube video next Sunday. And maybe we had a couple of different video ideas, but we were really ready to move forward with this one. Now, because these are just ideas and we're only moving forward with this particular video, we don't need to run this automation to create the placeholder in Frame until we're really ready to do so. Otherwise, we're just really wasting automations. So to accomplish that in this demonstration here, I'm going to use this create status to trigger the automation that will actually create the placeholder and link that placeholder back to this row for publishing this piece of content. So over here in this view, I'm going to go ahead and call this all content. And then I'm going to go ahead and just duplicate this here. And I'm going to rename it to ready to go. And then I'm going to go ahead and add a filter that's going to look at the content status is create. And now if we come back to the all content and change the status to create, we should now have a row here that we can use to trigger our new automation. And now we can jump into Make to build the automation. And if you're enjoying this video, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. It tells me what type of content you want more of. All right, so now I'm going to add the trigger for this automation, which will be when a new row enters this view. So I'll come back to the Airtable module. We'll use this automation here, watch records. This is a new database, so I'll go ahead and add a new connection. Connection type OAuth. We'll name this Frame Automations Demo. Save. Going to bring up the authentication page. Go ahead and add a base. Our content database. This is the one that we've been using. We'll grant access. Now we'll go ahead and select the base. We'll select the table content. For the trigger field, we'll use the created date. And for the label field, we'll go ahead and use the content ID. We'll leave the limit at 10 and we'll use the view ready to go. That way, when new records come into this view, it'll trigger this automation. We'll go ahead and click OK. Once you set this up, you're going to get this pop up here. It's really asking you from what point do you want to start looking for new records. So if I pick from now on, then it's obviously not going to register this row that was already there. But we can also put in a specific date. We can choose to process all the records that are in this view right here. I'm going to go ahead and choose manually. We see row 1 there. I'll go ahead and click OK. And then if I run this automation, it should find the row that we already added, and here it is. So now what we need to do is we need to add additional automations to create the frame.io placeholder. I'm going to go ahead and just create a new folder to work in, Frame Automations Demo. Click OK. I'll go ahead and go into this folder here. And now I'm going to come back to our automations. Going to add a new automation. This time we'll use frame. I'm going to go ahead and show more so I can see all of the different automations. For this, what we want to do is we're going to create a new asset. And I'll go ahead and show you how to add a new connection to frame.io. I'm going to add a new connection. I'm going to jump over to frame. I'm going to come up here, come down to the apps and integration. I'm going to come over here to token. I'm going to create a new token, Frame Automations Demo. Just give it a quick description. And then I'm going to come here and just select all scopes so that this key has permissions for everything. We'll submit that. Then I can copy that key here, come back to make, drop that key into this box here, go ahead and click save. Then I'll go ahead and select the team ID. If I jump back to frame, that's just pulling this team ID here. Then it's asking for the project. I'll just use this demo project here that we've been working in. And for the folder, I'll just use this frame automations demo. And then for the type, we're going to create a file. For the name, we'll go ahead and just use the description from the Airtable row. For the source URL, we'll go ahead and click into that. And then we'll come down here and expand the placeholder image, and we'll use this URL right here. That's all we need for this particular automation. I'll go ahead and click OK. I'll click save. And now if we jump back here to our Airtable database, again, we titled this as a YouTube video and we selected the content type video, and our content type for video is using this particular placeholder. So if we come back to this automation, I'm gonna right click again and choose where to start. Again, I'm gonna go ahead and choose manually. I'll choose that row number 1, click OK. I'll go ahead and save this automation since I haven't done that yet. And then I'll go ahead and run once. So now it found that record again, and it looks like this was successful. We'll come over to frame. We'll jump into our frame automations demo. And now we have that YouTube video placeholder ready to go so that someone could then upload their video and stack it on top. But before we do that, let's go ahead and create the automation that can detect when you stack something. And actually, before we even do that, one thing we need to do is, now that we've created this frame.io placeholder, we do need to update the Airtable row with that new frame.io asset so that when we do stack it, we'll be able to tie it back to this specific Airtable row and actually update the content with the new frame.io URL. So let's come back to the automation. I'm going to add one more module here. We'll use Airtable. This time we're going to update a record. For the connection, I'll use the same one that we just used. In this case, I'm going to have to update the permissions because now we're actually writing back to the database and we only got read permissions before. Follow the same procedure. Go ahead and add the base, our content database. There it is. Grant access. Now I'll go ahead and select the base, the table, content, and for the record ID, I will use what we got in this first step here. That is right there. And now what we need to update is the frame.io ID. We can type in asset ID, and we can use that right here. We'll make sure I'm in the frame.io field, and we'll grab that asset ID. And then for the frame.io URL, what we can do is we can come to frame. I'm gonna go ahead and go into this asset here, and then we can see how their URLs are constructed. I'm going to take this portion of it without the ID, and then I'm gonna copy that into this frame.io URL, and then I'm simply going to append the asset ID. So I'll type asset ID again. I'll grab that and put it right at the end of this URL. I'll go ahead and click OK. Actually, one other thing I might want to do as well is update the status. I'll go ahead and update that to in progress, which will also remove it from this ready to go view. I'll go ahead and click OK again, click save. Gonna go into this module again and choose where to start, choose manually. We'll go with row number 1 again, click OK, and then we'll run this once. If we jump over to frame.io, we'll notice that that new asset is coming in here. But the main difference is if we come back to Airtable and go to all content, we're going to see here we have the updated status and we have that frame.io URL. So if I were to click on this, it would take me directly to frame and directly to that placeholder and this asset that we just created. So with that, now we can move on to the stacking automation that will detect when we stack a video on our placeholder, and then it can update this row to review, as well as updating the frame.io ID and frame.io URL. All right, so now to get this stacking feature to work properly, where we can upload a video and stack it on top of one of our placeholders, and then automatically update our Airtable database to the most recent version that was updated. Because if you think about it, we might end up stacking multiple videos on top of the placeholder, and then stacking videos on top of the updated videos as new revisions of the same video come in. So for instance, we might stack this one time and then review the video, and then we may end up having to upload additional videos with revisions and then stack that video on top of the previous version. And what's cool here is you start to see that there's multiple versions here being stored into Frame. If we click into this, we can actually compare those different versions side by side. We can compare version 3 to version 2, or version 3 to version 1 in this case, which was just the placeholder. But to test this, I'm going to go ahead and exit back out, and I'm actually going to unstack all of these videos just so we can go ahead and test these properly. And then I'm going to go ahead and delete this placeholder because this is an older one. This is the most recent placeholder that we added. Notice if we click into it, we can see it ends with C4. And if I expand this column here, we'll see that it's pointing to C4. All right, so in order to set this up, we're going to come back to apps and integration. We can come down here to tokens, and then from here we can come up to developer tools, webhooks. And now before I create the webhook, I'm going to come back to make.com. I am going to save this automation that we used before. I'm going to go ahead and name it frame.io create placeholder, save that, and then I'll create another scenario, and I'm gonna go ahead and create a webhook. We'll create a custom webhook. Go ahead and click add, then you can go ahead and click save. It's gonna create this URL here. We can copy that to the clipboard, and then I'll go ahead and click OK. I'll come back to frame and we'll create that webhook. I'll call the webhook frame automation demo. And for the URL, I'm going to go ahead and insert that webhook from make.com. And so to be clear, when we take one of these videos and stack it on the placeholder, this webhook will trigger and it will send our make automation all the information we need to process the stacking event. So then we'll have to pick a team. And then for all of these options, the only one that we really need right now is versioned. So I'm going to come to asset versioned, and that's the terminology that frame.io uses. When you stack it, it creates a new version. So I'll go ahead and select this here, and then I'll go ahead and click submit. Now I'll come back to make.com. I'll go ahead and save this. I'll update the name of the automation, frame.io stacking. Go ahead and save it again. Let's go ahead and run once, and then we'll come back to frame, and I'll go ahead and stack a video on our placeholder, jump back to make.com, and then we can see here that it sent us a asset versioned webhook, and now we can build out the rest of our automation. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to make an API call to frame.io. So I'm not going to use any of the built-in functions that it has here. I'm going to scroll all the way to the bottom and I'm going to make an API call. And then I need to make sure to pick the right connection. This is the one that we're using for this exercise. And now for the URL here, I'm going to type in /v2 assets / and then I'm going to use a value from this webhook. Actually, before I make this API call, which is going to get the children of a particular asset. And by children, I mean all of the different assets that are stacked under the top one. Remember, as you stack on additional videos, we'll have more and more videos underneath the highest version, and those are considered the children. So I'm going to come back to the automation here and first load the asset that is being passed to us here. So I'm going to add a new module. We'll go to frame.io. We'll get an asset. Again, make sure you're using the right connection. The only required field here is the asset ID, and I'm going to pass in the resource ID that came in through this webhook, which is right here, resource ID. Click OK. Now we'll go ahead and make the frame.io API call, and then we'll finish this URL here. If you're not seeing the values here of this module here, simply go ahead and click OK. Save your module and refresh the page. And then we can come back into this call here and we should now be able to see those values. I'm just going to type in asset ID. We'll grab that and place it right at the end here. And then we just need to type /children. For method, we'll use get. For the headers, we'll use content type and application /JSON. Now there's nothing else we need here, so we'll go ahead and click OK. I'm going to go ahead and save this automation. And I'm going to come back to frame.io. I'm going to go ahead and just unstack this again. I'll come back to make. We'll go ahead and run this once. This time we need to run this in order to get the values here to continue on with our automation. I'll go ahead and stack this on the asset, jump back to make. That came through, and now we've successfully called the make API, and we have the values here, status code 200, that's great. And now we can look and see all of the output that we got back, and there are the different children, and we have 2 of them, which represents the 2 different versions in this stack. And so now what we need to do here is we need to iterate through these 2 versions that came back here, and we need to look up the frame.io ID that is currently in Airtable so that we can find the correct row to update with the new video that was stacked on the old one. So we're basically looking up the old frame.io ID in order to update it to the new frame.io ID and URL. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and add an iterator that's in flow control, iterator, and then we're going to use the body from this API call. That's right here. And again, it's an array of all of the different versions in the stack. Go ahead and click OK. And now what we'll do is we'll search Airtable. We'll use the Airtable module. We will search records. For the base, we'll go ahead with our content database. For table, we'll go with content. I'll go ahead and just select all. We'll go ahead and return all of the fields from Airtable. But then for the formula here, we're going to search the frame.io ID and match it against our iterator, which is the value here. Put this in quotes, value, end quote. So it's going to iterate through and search Airtable using the frame.io ID and the previous asset ID. So it's going to cycle through all these different versions to find the previous frame.io ID, which is going to identify the record, and then we can update it with the new ID. We'll go ahead and click OK. Let's go ahead and save this and give it a test. We'll run once. Before I run once, I'm going to come back to frame. I'm going to manage the stack and pop the top one off. Then I'm going to come back to make.com. I'll go ahead and do a run once, and then we'll stack this video on top of the placeholder. We'll see that ran. Again, we have 2 videos in the stack, so we can see the automation running twice. Let's go ahead and take a look at the search. Go into iteration 1. And I'm seeing our formula here, which we built in the search here, and it doesn't look like it's passing in anything to that formula. We have the quotes here, which it's empty. So I think we have the wrong value in here. I think this value is wrong, so I'm going to change that. I believe what we need is this ID right here. So I'm going to add that instead. Come back, click OK. Going to go ahead and save the automation. Going to jump back to frame. I'm going to manage the stack and pop it, the first one off the top. I'll come back to make, go ahead and run once. I'll go ahead and stack it once again, jump back to make. There we have that running. Now I'll open up the output, look at the operation. Now we've got that ID coming through. And so it searched that first ID, which is the one that's on top. And of course, that didn't match anything because that's the new video. But operation 2, it's searching for the ID of the placeholder, which is version 1 here. So it's searching Airtable for this placeholder and its original ID, which is in Airtable. And so we can see in this second operation here with that ID, it was able to find that row. And so now all we have to do is move forward and update that Airtable record, update record. We'll pick the base and the table content, and we can update the frame.io ID with the cover asset ID. And then again, for the frame URL, I'll jump back to frame, just grab this player URL here, copy, paste that back into our automation. And then I will add the cover asset ID to the end here, cover asset ID from step number 3, which is this here. And then I can go ahead and click OK. Forgot to update the record ID, which is going to be the record ID from this search. So I'll click into record ID. I'll remove cover asset here, and then we'll use the ID from the search. We'll go ahead and click OK. But before we run this, we do need to add a filter here so that we're only running this automation here when we found a record. Remember, the first operation here did not have any records, only this second operation where we see this record here. So we want to make sure that we only run this condition when the total number of bundles is equal to 1. We'll click OK. We'll go ahead and click save. Then I'm going to go ahead and manage the stack and pop this one off the top. I'll come back to make.com. We'll go ahead and run once. And now what should happen is when we stack the next video, this row will get updated with the new frame.io ID and URL. So we'll come here, we'll stack this video on the placeholder, watch our automation run, successfully updated. And now if we come back to Airtable, we notice that this frame.io URL was just updated. So now when we click on this URL, it's going to go to our newly uploaded and stacked video instead of the placeholder. Just like that, notice it's now linking to version 2 instead of version 1. All right, so now our automations are automatically helping us create those placeholders once we move the status to create. And then as we upload new videos and stack those videos on previous videos, it automatically updates the proper row with the new frame.io asset and URL. One final thing that we can also do is update the status to review. If somebody's uploading a video onto a previous, it's safe to assume that that new video needs to be reviewed. And so we can come into the automation here and automatically change that status to review by unchecking this map and just moving this to review here and clicking OK. But not only that, I'll go ahead and save the automation. We can come into our Airtable automations and we can actually add a new automation. I'll add a trigger when record matches conditions, select table, content. The condition is when the status is review. I'll move back to the data here and just move this to review real quick, come back to the automation, and then we'll choose a record to play with, which is now record number 1. And now what we can do is we can actually send a Slack message. You could also send an email. I'm just going to go ahead with a Slack message, send message. You pick the account. I'll connect up with my content engine team. We'll select a channel. We'll broadcast this into the KEDB distribution channel. And from here, we can write a message. We can say content ID, and then we'll add a value here, and we'll scroll down to that content ID. It's pulling these fields from whatever record triggered here, which is that row we have in the content table, which has the content ID. Then we could put description, going to add another field here, description, status, add that field here, review, and then we could even provide the link and we'll grab that from the frame.io URL. And we can go ahead and simply run as configured and test this automation. And if I jump into my Slack in that KEDB distribution channel, you can see here that Airtable just sent a message into Slack saying content ID number 1, description YouTube video, status is in review, and provides a direct link so we could simply click on it. Then we could go ahead and watch that video. We could mark it up, leave a comment. We could set up additional automation so that when you move it back to in progress, it sends another message back to the editor. And then if it was back in progress, of course, back in frame, we could stack version 3 onto the old one. I'll turn this automation on just to test that. We'll stack on that version 3 of the video. The automation will run. This time it moved it back to review. And if I had had this automation on, it would have automatically sent another message back to Slack. And again, if you want to get access to the templates that you saw today, along with a bunch of other cool projects and templates, jump into this growing community, get personalized help with me and my team through tech support, or jump into any of the daily calls that you have to get help. Would love to see you there. Either way, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you on the next one.